you know, when I asked you how they got involved in sports psychology, um, was there a time in your childhood or high school uh, where you made the decision to get into psychology eventually? And how did it
No,
all start?
no. I don't think as a child I had any idea what psychology was. Certainly not sports psychology. I played a lot of sports growing up, and I went to McGill. I had played a lot of football. I was fortunate we won the city championship in junior high and in senior high. And I actually was a city all-star in football, which was cool. Then I went to McGill and I thought I might go in the direction of medicine, but I didn't like the hard sciences and I found psychology and I really liked it. And I continued to play football at McGill. We won the national championship. And then I went to graduate school. I went to Dalhousie. I did a master's in psychology, which was pretty general psychology. It wasn't clinical per se. And then I came out and I wanted some clinical experience. So I worked for a couple of years in a mental hospital in Quebec. I had a lot of experience. I remember saying to one of the psychiatrists that I wondered if I could sit in on one of his groups. And he said to me, "Sit in, I'll give you a group." And he gave me a group, and I didn't have much experience at all. And it was in the locked ward where two of the guys in the group had killed people. So it was kind of exciting. I was in pretty good shape, so I figured I could handle myself. Anyway, I went back to school. I went to the University of Maryland to get a PhD, but the American program is very rigid, and I'd already had a couple of years of experience. So I transferred to the Institute of Psychiatry at the University of London in England, where they let you shape your own program much more. And did a PhD there and in clinical psychology, and found it really interesting. Did a lot of work. My PhD dissertation was on the role of suggestion in psychotherapy, the importance of what we think and what we believe. And I'd had enough schooling. My wife and I, we bought a VW van and we drove to India from England. We were on the road for almost 2 years. I taught in Greece, I taught in Iran, came back, got a job at Mississippi State. Actually, I taught in England too. Got a job at Mississippi State, and I was teaching psychology, and I was clinical director of the counseling center. And it was there that the tennis coach, a fellow named Jim Poling, came in and asked me if I would work with the tennis team. And Jim was formerly in the military in the U.S. Army, and they had done a fair bit of mind control with some of the soldiers. And he was really impressed with the results, and he was asking if I could work with his team. And I did, and we had some really good results. And then it became the golf team, and then it became the baseball team. And again, we were just getting great results. One of the kids on the baseball team, Mississippi State, was always top 20 in the nation in baseball. One of the kids tied the NCAA record for most home runs in a single season, had a huge performance jump. And in Mississippi, college sports is really big. There's not pro sports at the highest level. And so Davy Johnson was the manager of the Jackson Mets AA team, and he was interested in what I was doing with this kid to increase his home run production. And so he had me come down to Jackson, and we had a conversation. And he was very impressed. Really smart guy, always innovative. And so he hooked me up with the player development guy for the New York Mets, and I met with him. And he said, "You've had a lot of success working with collegiate baseball," because we had a number of things that worked out really well. And he said, "But have you ever worked with the pro players?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, it's completely different." He kind of blew me off. And it's not different at all. It's very much the same, except that egos get bigger as you go up the ladder. And so I went back my wife didn't like Mississippi much. We moved back to Vancouver, and I started working with the AAA Baseball Canadians. Actually, this may be more information than you want, but I approached the Baseball Canadians. We're the Milwaukee Brewers AAA team, and it was during the Major League strike. And the way it works in minor baseball is like the Vancouver Canadians own the bats and the balls and the seats, but they don't own the players. That's the Brewers. So they had to wait for the Brewers assistant general manager to come down before they could give me permission to work with the players. And when he came down and we met, he said, you know, what you've done in college is impressive, but you don't expect to get paid to work with these guys, do you? And I said, well, you know, if you work with the doctor, you got to pay something. So he said, if I go to Bud Selig, who was a GM with the Brewers at that time, later became the commissioner of baseball, he said, if I go to Bud Selig and ask him for money for a psychologist for our minor league program, he's going to tell me to go see a psychologist. So I said, you know what? Just give me the guys. And so he gave me 4 or 5 guys to work with. Kevin Bass was one of them, who went on to have a great career in the major leagues. And I worked with them. And then I also worked with the BC Lions. And then it spread out to the Vancouver Canucks. And this was in the early 80s. And the Canucks, when I started with the Canucks that year, they had won, I think it was 3 or 4 games in their last 20. They were really struggling. Harry Neal was coaching. And I must have called Harry about 8 times, and I'd leave a message, he'd never pick up. Finally, one time when I called, he picked up the phone. I guess he was expecting somebody else to call. And he said, who's this? And I said, Saul Miller. He said, you know, you are really persistent. And he said it like, you know, you're a pain in the butt. And I said, Harry, you'd expect your players to be persistent, wouldn't you? And he started laughing. He said, okay, okay, what is it you want? And I said, I want to talk to you about how I might be able to help the team. So we had a meeting. I went up to his office and we had a meeting, and they gave me about 6 or 7 players to work with. Um, some really good guys. I mean, this goes way back. Glenn Hanlon was the goalie, Tiger Williams, Darcy Rhoda, all these guys. Anyway, the bottom line is, not because of me, but the team went on to the Stanley Cup Finals, 81, 82, and lost 4 straight to a very good Islanders team. But it just kept expanding, you know. I was always ready to go anywhere at any time to work with people. And something you said earlier, I think is really important, and that is you have to keep it simple. If you're making it complicated, it's not going to work. There are 2 parts to being effective at what I do. One part is having a technology that works, and the other is being able to sell it to the people, being able to frame it in a way that they engage with it, that they are attracted to it, and they can use it. And that's always been, I mean, I think people say, I've written 10 books, and people say, well, you know, the thing about your books is that it's pretty easy to understand. And it should be. It should be easy to understand. I worked at one time when I was in graduate school for this Hungarian psychiatrist, and I was like writing his research papers. And he said to me, um, I wrote this paper, and he handed it back to me. He said, I used to work with this man who said he gave famous researcher. He gave every paper to his mother to read, and if she couldn't understand it, it was too complicated. He said, write it more simply. And there's wisdom in that. I mean, it's being able to express these ideas clearly enough and simply enough that people can say, yeah, I can do that. And they try and do it, and they do it.
You know, Saul, my late wife always used to tell me, um, it's common sense.
Yeah.
And she's right. Um, and it's common sense, but it's not common. And I'm really, really interested in that side of it. But let's see what Peter has on his mind right now.
Yeah, I just had a question. So, what's the youngest athlete you work with? Like what age? What age group?
I prefer, Peter, I prefer to work with people 13 and up. If you're working with younger athletes, they don't have the same maturity or the same level of emotional management. But I certainly have worked with younger athletes. I remember a woman phoned me up and she said, "My son is a really good golfer, but he gets emotional. Is that something you could help him with?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what I do." And then she told me he was 6 years old. And every time he made a bad shot, he got upset. And sometimes he cried or he threw his club. And the other side of it was when he was playing with another kid and the other kid made a bad shot, he got really happy. So I worked with both him and his mother together. And, you keep it simple. One of the keys in what I do, I work a lot with breathing. I mean, breathing is a key to emotional control. It's a key to having being in the moment. I always tell athletes when we worry, we're into the future. We're worrying about something. When we're frustrated or disappointed, it's the past. But the game is now. How do I get into the now, this breath? So I work with breathing, but with kids, little kid, you can just take a breath. Okay, let's just take a breath, calm down, see the shot you want to make if we're talking golf. So, I think there's some things you can do. I've had goalies who are 10 years old and getting very emotional. And again, there's some things that you can do, but I prefer to work with 12 and up, 13 and up.
Yeah, I asked the question too because when I coached at prep school too for about a dozen years, and we would go out and talk and have little conferences with parents and kids. Maybe go to a hockey camp over the summer and talk about prep school and try to introduce them to that. And the thing that was really interesting was, and I don't know if you ever run across this, or maybe it just happenstance. So if the kids are around 12 years old, 11, 12 years old, pee-wee age, they ask a million questions. Like they want to know everything. I had one kid ask, "Can you have a carpet in your dorm room?" Yes, you can have a carpet. Then your next group comes in and they're bantams, which are 13, 14-year-olds. And you give your presentation and then you ask if there's any questions. And the first thing they do is they look left, they look right, then they look behind them to see if anybody else is going to raise their hand and ask a question. So it's incredible from that essentially 1 or 2 year age bracket where they're more concerned with what the boy or girl next to them are going to think about them than actually trying to get something out of the whole conversation. I just always found that fascinating.
Well, I think it's very interesting because if I'm speaking to young groups like Bantam age players, I would often say to the team that's asking me to speak to them, it's good to have the parents there and have the parents sitting in the back because the parents will ask questions and they get the thing going. And yeah, often the kids don't. I find that if it was like you go a little older, like 15, 16, and you're talking to boys, sometimes they're sitting like a little stoned, and you're talking to girls and they're taking notes. The girls are much more, I found, attentive to the talk than the boys.
Yeah, much more focused. I have a son and a daughter, and I can attest to that.
Yeah, yeah. So I have one funny story. It has nothing to do with sports psychology, but I was reminded when I said I was working with this psychiatrist doing research, the one who wanted me to write papers that basically his mother would understand. I would interview patients for him, and I would do some research projects and write reports. Anyway, I was working in a hospital. This was during the summer, and I sometimes at that point, I was probably 23, 24. I would have a large lunch and I'd get tired, I'd get sleepy. And I guess probably was eating too much at lunch. But nevertheless, one time I had this phenomenon. I went back to my office and I closed the door and I put my head down on the desk and I had a quick nap, and there was a knock at the door, and I, got up and straightened my tie and went to open the door, and it was a psychiatrist with this patient he wanted me to interview. And he looked at me and he said, "What happened to your head?" I had fallen asleep on my wristwatch and I had this mark. Really incriminating moment. Anyway, it has nothing to do with sports psychology.
Listen, I'm not related to sports psychology, but maybe it is. I'm not sure if you've heard of Claire Drake. I'm sure you have in Canada. Sure. Claire was famous for power snoozes. I've sat in presentations, and he was 2%, and he was napping and dozing off. And at the same time, he was writing his presentation on defensive zone coverage. And when it was his turn, it was the most brilliant presentation I've ever seen. So I don't know whether the power snooze helped you or not, but I'm really curious. The one question I have here now, related to that, a psychiatrist came in to have you talk to a patient. And that's sort of like La La Land, academic land. You know what I mean? People get frightened, psychiatry, and yet they came to you with a simple approach.
Well, I got to clarify that. I mean, he was doing research, and there was a certain protocol. There was a certain series of questions that he wanted all of his psychiatric subjects to go through, so that any procedures, you had some data on people before they participated in the actual study. So it wasn't like I was doing his work. I was just running through this protocol that he had, which was great experience for a young person, but it was he was still the man. I mean, but let's get into talking some hockey. When we spoke yesterday and before, I know you were quite interested in the work I do with goalies. And I think that, as I said to you, I think that goalies are quite different in a couple of ways. And one way is the way they play. They're both an individual sport, playing an individual sport, and a team sport. And when I say the team sport, obviously they're in the game. There's a flow to the game. They have to know the schemes, the defensive patterns, what their D is going to do, how they're going to defend in different ways, so that they can count on certain things and react accordingly. So they have to be very much part of the team thing in that respect. On the individual plane, most of the players are on the ice for anywhere from 30 to 45 or 50 seconds a shift. Hopefully it's not too much longer. And the goalies are out there for the entire period, which in a 20-minute period usually means they're out there for 30 minutes straight. So they're out there, they're on an island of their own, and they have to learn how to manage that. Just the energy of that, the focusing of that, the emotions of that. Players, forwards, D, they have similar things, but not nearly. They can always go back to the bench after 40, 50 seconds and reset, catch their breath, think about what they just did on that shift, what they're going to do next. The goalie is out there for a long time. And for goalies, often attentions drift. You can't be on the edge like that for the entire 30 minutes of a 20-minute period. So they have to really learn some skills about bringing the energy back to them and having the ability to refocus and reset. And again, breathing, self-talk, One of the key things I do with goalies that I think is really important, along with, is I give them anchors. I ask them to pick at least 2 or 3 anchors. These are things that will help them to stop the puck. And most goalies, I'll give you an example, are picking things like be square to the shooter and track pucks. Those are good anchors. Or hands up and in front and track pucks. Those things will help you to stop the puck. Worrying about what the coach is thinking, or that somebody didn't put shots on the shot clock, or that the referee missed a call, or some guy sprayed you or bumped you, or you let the last one in, none of that helps you to stop the puck. But if you have some anchors that you've really worked with, no matter what's happening, you can always go back to these anchors. And it's interesting. I mentioned it, I think, in Hockey Tough, that one of the players I worked with many years ago was Devin Dubnyk. Devin was a really good player in junior and was a first-round pick in the NHL, went to Edmonton, which at the time had a terrible team, was getting blitzed, lost confidence, traded to Montreal, didn't work out, ended up in Arizona, and suddenly he became a Vezina candidate. And I remember talking to him after that and saying, what happened? I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and he'd had a complete transformation. And he said 2 things, and they're both really relevant. He said, first of all, I had a goalie coach who believed in me, which was Sean Burke. And it's just an example that it's really important. If coaches can give the impression that they believe in a player, it makes a difference. And the second thing he said was, and this is key, I learned to keep the game small. For him, he said, it's just push, stop, set. Push, stop, set. I don't care if it's game 1 in the season or game 7 in the playoffs. At least that's what he said. I learned to keep the game small. So that to me is like, that's the anchors. Just focus on what you need to do to stop the puck, not what the score is, that you can't let in another one, that the coach doesn't like you, whatever. Keep the game small. And so my general formula for all players, and really for people in all sports, is create the right focus, create the right feeling, and create the right attitude. And right focus is about your strength as a player, seeing your strength as a player, seeing yourself doing things that you do when you're playing well. When I ask players to define, usually give me 5 or 6 things when they're playing their best, what it looks like. Why? Because it's important before a game, before a practice. Think of making for a forward, making the good pass, moving your feet, winning battles, driving the net, aggressive on the forecheck, shooting to score. See yourself doing these things. Know what your strength is as a player. I have the head, I have the heart, I have the hands, I have the wheels. Why are you a good player? We're focusing on you at your best. That's what you bring to it. So that's the the focus part. And I often ask them, one of the things I do is I ask them to pick an animal that would give them the feelings they'd want to have if they were playing great. And it's really interesting with elite athletes, not kids. Kids say crazy things, but elite athletes will 98 to 99% pick predators. When I say pick an animal, they pick tigers, cheetahs, wolves, bears, lions. They pick and I say, these animals are hunters. What is the difference between the forward who's a predator and the forward who's the prey? And the forward who's the predator steps out on the ice to make something happen. He's playing like it's my puck. He's out there to win battles, drive the net, finish his checks, whatever. The prey is tentative. The prey doesn't want to make a mistake. And what's really interesting is when you get coaches who are hyper aggressive, they sometimes turn predators into prey. They get some kid who's now, the coach has yelled at him so many times that the kid's now out there squeezing his stick, doesn't want to make a mistake. So it's the same with goalies. You know, you're the goalie that's the predator. They cross the blue line, they're into tiger country, and you're hunting pucks, and you want the puck. It's your puck, as opposed to the goalie who's the prey, who's a little back in the net, who's a little more careful, and you know, is just not as big. It's just over tensing. So that's just right focus. And then we have to get into right feeling, which is really about managing your emotional intensity. And I always show the players this graph. And it's a graph that shows the relationship between performance, which is here. So this is maximum performance, and this is emotional intensity. And we see that no intensity, you know, you're almost asleep, performance is low. But as you get dialed in, as you have an edge, you're in your optimal zone. Now you're trying too hard, you're feeling too much pressure, and you're getting too tight, performance drops off. And a lot of the people I'm dealing with are in this range here. And so the question becomes, what can you do to get back into that optimal zone? And part of it's the way you talk to yourself. I can handle this, I'm a good player. But the other part is working with your breathing so that you control your emotional intensity. And I always explain to athletes, look, I'm a pretty smart guy. I know if I go to the gym and I lift, I get stronger. I know that, but I don't go to the gym. So understanding what I'm talking about, but not doing the work changes nothing. You got to work with the breathing. And I give all my clients an individual personalized recording. And I ask them to listen to that every day. And after a number of days of doing this, after a period of time, they do have a little more control of managing their emotions. And that's what's key. So for a goalie, you want to maintain good focus. You want to maintain the right level of emotional intensity. You know, and I imagine last night looking at scores on opening night for some of the Canadian teams. Wow, there's a few goalies that I'm sure are, you know, going to need some work with their breathing to calm down. I mean, 8 goals against, 6 goals against, 5 goals against. Wow. I saw Vancouver opening night, 26 shots, 6 goals. Edmonton let in 6 goals, lost 6-0 to Winnipeg. What do you call it? Las Vegas scored 8 goals on Colorado. You know, it's not all on the goalie, but that's how we look at it. That's why goalies have tremendous pressure. Jacques Plante once said, can you imagine a job where every time you make a mistake, a red light goes on and 15,000 people stand up and cheer? He said, that's pressure. Well, today it's 18,000 or 20,000 stand up and cheer. And there was a lot of cheering last night.
Saul, I watched parts of the Calgary-Vancouver game, and Vladar in the net was brilliant in the first 10 or 12 minutes. And when I look at that game, not thinking of one individual, I'm a head coach thinking of the team. Mm-hmm. And what strings do I have to pull to make the team perform better because it wasn't doing well? And I can't worry about the goalie and his feelings, but I do. And goaltending appears to me to be something that needs some extra help. And they're on an island, but they're also on a team.
Yeah.
And the team can come back for them. But in the end, Vladar's got to work it out. And a head coach has got to worry about the entire team. And of course, I believe the head coach of Calgary is mindful of this goalie. Calgary is known for having a struggle with getting their goalies to peak perform consistently. And yet what role does the head coach play in what you're talking about? Because back in my era, working with the men's national team and Dave King, he said to me, players don't need sports psychologists, coaches do.
Well, I think he's right. I think coaches do need, I think he's half right. I think coaches can benefit from sports psychology. Some of them can for sure. And I think, but I think players can as well. And, your role as the head coach is to pretty much be concerned with getting that team to perform at its best. And, these goalies in the NHL, they're not children. I mean, you don't have to baby them or pamper them. I mean, if you're getting blitz, if you're the goalie, I mean, 7 or 8 have gone by you. Maybe as a head coach, you put somebody else in there just to, you know, take the pressure off. But no, your focus is on the whole team. It's very different coaching little kids, coaching youngsters, where you maybe do have to be more concerned about the goalie, but not at the NHL level. I mean, you have a goalie coach, you you set an ethic for the team, and it applies to everybody. So and I just really don't know how to answer that. I know that I remember I was in Switzerland. I worked in Switzerland for about 15 years from 2005, well, more, 7 till 2022. And I remember I was working with a team in Zug, which was a good team. And I was sitting with Peter Meckler, the goalie coach, who later became the national team goalie coach. And we were watching a junior game. I was there working with the professional team, the Swiss National Hockey League, but they had a junior team affiliated with them. And we were watching the junior team, and they scored a goal on the goalie of the junior team. I guess it wasn't a very good goal. And the coach, who was a very emotional guy, turned around and he pointed at Peter in the stands. It's like, this is on you. You're the goalie coach. So if he's going to behave like that, he's certainly going to make his goalie feel uncomfortable. And that's not going to help the goalie. So, yeah, you do have to work with coaches to help them to understand. I give a talk to coaches called The Biggest Mistake Coaches Make. And it's too much negativity. I mean, I list 10 things. It's too much negativity. It's too much emotion. And the third thing is insensitivity. And by that, I mean, many coaches don't realize their style of communication, and they don't realize who they're talking to. So there are some kids who are very extroverted, some coaches very outgoing, extroverted. An extroverted coach can get in the face of some kid who's quite extroverted and say, that's terrible, and the kid will say, well, I'll show you, and the kid will go out there and play better. If the same coach is broadcasting that way to a more sensitive, introverted kid tightens up and has exactly the opposite effect. So some coaches are not aware of their style of communication. I mean, they're just emotionally into it. And sometimes, if they're talking to Tiger Williams and they say to him, that's horseshit, Tiger will go out there and he'll spear somebody and win the puck and make something happen. But it's not the appropriate approach for a lot of other people. And it's understanding who you are. I was working with one NHL team. I won't mention who the coach was, but he was yelling all the time. He yelled at our players, he yelled at the officials, and he yelled at the other team. And I was getting feedback from both the veterans on the team and some of the young guys on the team that it was distracting. And so I'm very open about communicating. I went to the coach and I said, I'm getting a lot of feedback from both the veterans and the young guys that there's too much emotion on the bench. And so they didn't hire me next year. That's one way to deal with that. Get rid of the messenger.
Can you help the messenger? Have you worked with coaches, the messengers?
Yeah, sure. If awareness is a transformative thing, if you can help people to be a little more aware, if you can help them to have a little more emotional management, more emotional control, just like the same thing. I mean, it just, I've been in this a long time, like yourself. I mean, I've been doing this for over 40 years. I used to work with the Rams. I'm on the sidelines in a game. This is in the NFL. A guy misses his assignment. I don't know, the defensive back misses his assignment. Guy's wide open, catches a pass and goes, big gain. The D-back comes off the field. The defensive coach is really upset and embarrassed. And he said, like, what the F were you thinking? What the heck are you doing out there? He doesn't want to, that's not the question he wants answered. He wants to say, when they come up two guys wide, you got the wide guy, but he's emotional and he makes the guy feel terrible some of those guys will go out there the next time and be better because they've been, just got a shot. And other guys will go out and be worse because they got a shot. So the coach should be more aware of managing their emotion if we expect the players to manage their emotion.
So I have a story of a coach coaching U13 girls, professional experience, played 12 years in the NHL, played with 3 different teams in Europe, and he's coaching his daughter's U13 team. And exactly like you said, I'm on the bench watching him deliver emotionally, not negatively, but yelling at the players and telling them what to do on the ice so that they're not distracted, because he's basically giving them every suggestion in the world live and loud as they're on the ice. And then he yells at referees. And it was too much. So I talked to him and I asked him to record himself. And because of his experience, he did. And he was embarrassed. And it really was effective for him.
I think it's a really, really good technique, Wally. And it's a really good technique. I had exactly that experience with a soccer mom, was very upset the way this coach was yelling at her kid. And, I mean, what can you do? I said, videotape him. And then if he sees what he looks like, it's an eye-opening thing. I think that's a really good idea. And it's funny, I had an experience. Well, I was contacted last week by a women's U18 team, by the coach. I'm going to work with the team in a week or so. And it's a new coach. And she said the previous coach was very, very hard on the girls, yelled at the girls. And I'm trying to change that. They're waiting for the next person to yell at them. And, that's like we said, I think we had this conversation, Wally and I did yesterday, and I said, Ryan Walter, who was a fine player, captain of the Canadians, later became a good coach. And Ryan was coaching at one time, he was an assistant with the Canucks, and he was also the national team coach with the Canadian women's team. And he said to me that there's a real difference in coaching men and women. He said, if I'm working with the NHL team and I don't say anything to one of the guys for 2 weeks, he thinks he's doing fine. If I don't say anything to one of the girls for 2 days, she thinks there's something wrong. So women are much more sensitive to that kind of input. And if somebody is yelling, even if they're yelling appropriate instructions, they're going to react differently than boys would, and more in the direction of it being counterproductive.
Well, Hal, I have a story related to exactly what you said. I don't know if oxymoron is the right word, but that same coach that recorded himself was working with a spring team. The U13 girls get to move up to U15. So he's got the first year U15s in really competitive hockey. And they're playing a game and against an opponent that's superior to them. And between periods, what he did, I've never seen any coach do. And the result was shocking for me. If you can imagine girls turning 14, having a bad period, him coming into the room with a loud voice, but he knew what he was doing. He played this role. He was angry with their lack of compete, their lack of effort, and in his languaging, he said, "Some of you don't want to play. You're whining. You're crying on the bench. Well, if you don't want to go out there, take your equipment off." And he slammed his large whiteboard down on the floor with a dry erase marker. He said, "If you don't learn how to compete at this level, you shouldn't be here. So if you don't want to compete, take your equipment off. I'm leaving the room. I only want the people in this room who write their names on that board." And I was shocked. Like I said, ooh. I didn't stay for the rest of the game. I had to go to another game where I was dropping a puck to kick off a tournament. And I said to the assistant coach who I worked with during the year with another team, "Gee, I'm going to call you after to find out how this went. I've never seen anything like it." And when I called, he said, "We should have tied the game in the last 10 seconds. They didn't count a goal." The girls really responded. So this particular coach, he knows how to push buttons. He knows how to play the game as a coach with players to get the most out of them. And I've seen him actually manipulate officials, uh, just trying to make points in subtle ways. He's also been thrown out of a lot of games.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a good model to be manipulating officials and be thrown out of games if you're coaching, 15-year-old girls. I mean, that's not, Tom Landry, you remember the great NFL football coach,
Yes.
always, wore his fedora, always was calm. And he said, if you want your players to be emotionally under control, you have to look like you're emotionally under control. And, that's one approach. I think there's a latitude you have if you're working with adults that you can be a little more expressive. But with youngsters, you got to be careful. I mean, there's sensitivity. When I wrote Hockey Tough, there's an epilogue at the back of the book, which initially the publishers were maybe discouraging me for putting in the book. They said, let's just focus on what it takes to, improve play, the right focus, the right feeling, the right attitude. And, but I said, no, I want this epilogue in there. And the epilogue really is about the difference between coaching kids and coaching elite athletes. When you're coaching youngsters and, 13, 14 are youngsters, yeah, you want to get them to be better players for sure, but you want to keep nurturing their love of the game. And you get some coaches who are coaching even younger kids who, think they're coaching in the NHL. And I think that's a real mistake. Love is power. I always talk to my clients about the difference between love and fear. To me, these are the core human emotions. Love, we expand. I love to play the game. I love the challenge. Fear, we contract. Don't make a mistake. And so somebody who's working with players has to be able to grow that big experience, grow their passion for the game. Now, you mentioned this thing worked, but, I'm glad it did. But, somebody who gets thrown out of games uh, repeatedly and is working with 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, it's not a good model.
Well, it hasn't happened since
Mm,
we had the conversation and listening to the recording. Um, the one time I saw it happen, it was for the players to know that he cared.
I understand.
And to do that with 13-year-olds as a mentor, I wasn't upset. I knew what he was doing.
Hmm.
And our relationship was quite quite solid.
Hmm.
I I've got a word here that, and this could be at the pro level, but I think it doesn't matter if you're teaching or in business, working with people, or coaching a pro team. Um, there's two words that I picked up from a parent coach many years ago. He demands effort and respect. Those are the two values in his coaching, and he delivers on it, being who he is, his personality. He's authentic, consistent, walks the talk. And the word authenticity of being who you are and being able to control, consistently observe and address, not address, make the right communication in the right situation. It's really an art. And this fellow with very little parent, with very little uh, coaching experience, but just a great human being who cared about the kids and what they were doing and getting out of the sport. He achieved great things at that age level and really influenced me moving forward as a coach. So, my question, I guess, is can coaches change?
Yeah,
Adults,
sure. Sure.
okay?
I think they can. I mean, I think one of the simple things that I've sometimes said to coaches is instead of saying to somebody, somebody, you have to, as a coach, you have to hold people accountable. I mean, you can be encouraging, but you have to hold people accountable. I mean, you have to let people know the kind of behavior, the kind of play that's what you want, and the kind of play that's not what you want, that's not acceptable. And I like to use the term, that's who you are, or that's who we are. So if we were showing video and we see some good things, we say, guys, that's who we are. You see that? How he was aggressive on the forecheck? That's who we are. That's who we are. That's who we are. If we see that people are not doing what we want, instead of saying, what the heck are you doing? It's saying, hey, like let's say an example where we have two guys aggressive on the forecheck and the third guy we want high, and we see all three go into the same corner. We say, hey guys, that's not who we are. We want this one guy high. So when we say that's not who we are, we're telling, or that's not who you are to an individual. You tell an individual that's not who you are. You're telling them that that behavior wasn't what was expected or wasn't what's appropriate, and you're better than that, instead of making them feel like they're not better. I gave a talk years ago. Was talking to the St. Louis Blues, and afterwards, one of the players came up to me and he said to me, I I'm not sure how I should prepare for a game because you're saying you should get an idea what you want to do, and I have two roles. Like on one line I'm a checker, and on the other line I'm kind of a playmaker. Should I be doing how should I prepare for the game? I said, look, I'm not the coach. But you're a smart guy, and it's really important that you know what's expected. So I want you to talk to the coach and get clear from him how he thinks you should prepare for the game. I mean, so anyway, he said, okay, he's going to talk to the coach, and he left. And Roger Nielsen, who was a wonderful guy and a good friend, Roger came up to me and he was laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And he said, Saul, it's the first time anybody ever told that guy that he's smart. And because I said to him, you're a smart guy. So he said, so I said, Roger, if we want players to play smart, we should be telling them that they are smart. if we keep telling people that they're dumb, that they're stupid, that they're, always doing the wrong thing, they'll show us that they're stupid and that they do the wrong thing. So it's like putting that image out. If they're not doing it the way you want, hey, that's not who you are. You make that play. You have better gaps, or you have better angles, whatever it is. You tell them the way you want it to be, and that they're capable of being that, rather than that they're a disappointment and that they're, just inadequate.
So I worked with a sport association in a small community outside of Calgary, and we did work on communication with coaches and behavioral coaching, I called it. And the idea of feedback, I've actually videoed from the bench the game while it's being played, so you could hear the voices of the coaches on the bench. And I've shared it with them after, asking them to look at the game, but also hear themselves. And one of the things that the biggest thing is we point out mistakes. And if you point them out in a tone of voice and you're derogatory and upset, like you said, it's going to hurt the athlete, not help the athlete. So in our feedback, this is with a group of a group of mentors. Morris Lukovich was one of them. We had a group of about 10 guys with that kind of sporting experience that did go on benches, did work with coaches, and the idea of how you respond to a mistake, it's more of asking them questions rather than telling them what they did wrong in a way that's derogatory.
Yeah, that's why I think you're absolutely right. And I think you've got to give them feedback. And I think saying to somebody, that's not who you are, tells them that what they did wasn't appropriate and that they're better than that. And then you tell them, when they do this, this is what we do, Peter, any comments about any of this stuff?
Peter, your speaker.
Yep. No. Yeah, I got it now, I think, Wally. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, especially dealing with, because I coach at prep school level, university level, and the one common thread, and now I'm working actually with youth level in my community with the coaches and that, and the one constant is the players want to please. Like they want to do well. They do want to please. So like what you're saying with your approach, I mean, I agree 100%. I think it goes through with the guys I know all the way up to the NHL level, that there's a certain point where you become a personnel manager as much as you are as a coach. And I think it speaks to what you said about, you have to know if I respond, if I'm that type A, real type A personality, I may respond to that aggressive behavior. If I'm a bit more timid, I've got to be encouraging, right? I know that's not a play that you normally make. I know that you're better than that. That goes a lot longer. That goes with that kid, that goes a lot further, right? But I don't think it matters if you're dealing with youth level, prep school level, like I say, university or pro level. You've got to get to know who your kids are. Like back in the day, right, of the breaking the clipboard in half and throwing it in the trash and yelling and screaming, and like that's so far gone. And that's one of the things, honestly, I appreciate. I have enjoyed about coaching. I retired 2 years ago, but I enjoyed about it was you could get better. Like you could get better every day too as a coach. And to me, that's kind of exciting to wake up every day and know that you could get better at something as opposed to, well, I just know everything.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all of us, it's all a great journey and journey of discovery and enjoy, and we should be enjoying the process.
Yeah, it's way too much work and I've always told players that it's way too much work for it not to be fun.
Yeah,
Like you got to find, it's not going to be fun all the time. I get it. I mean, that's the real world. That's life. Your, your relationships aren't always going to be fun. Your job potentially isn't always going to be fun. But at the end of the day, you have to find more enjoyment in what you do than not. If you can't find enjoyment, maybe it's not for you, which is okay too.
Yeah. Well, I go back to love and fear. And love, I tell the players I work with, if you're playing hockey, you've chosen something that's very challenging. Physically, you have to be in good shape, you have to be strong, you have to be fast. Mentally, you have to make quick decisions, you have to be brave. It's very challenging. Either you love the challenge, you step into it, I love this, or you fear the challenge. Don't make a mistake. And you don't need people coaching you who are, waiting to be hypercritical, or especially with developing players, or they end up, as I say, not loving the challenge, and then they don't perform as well. And then they don't even stay in the game as long.
No, I think you got to give them, like you said, you have to give them solutions, not like, I don't care how old the kid is. They know what they did wrong. They know they know they made a mistake. So how do we fix it in
Yeah.
your approach, right, to that individual? Like you said, depends on their personality. But that's, I mean, that's really what it is. And that's kind of made coaching a little bit more fun. Makes you a little bit more of a human than maybe how coaching was done 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the good thing about the evolution, I mean, there's some things too that, now it's like everybody's okay, which is, um, anyway, I don't want to, I don't want to go off in a wrong direction here.
I,
Um,
I know where you're going. Don't open that room is very dark. Don't open that door.
yeah.
I've got a related question, I hope. Peter, you've coached many athletes' ages over the years. Saul, similarly. Um, what do you do with the yeah but athlete as a coach? You have a suggestion, and he just is yeah but he's got an excuse. Dave Marcoux brought this up last year, working with some goaltenders.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever encountered that? And if so,
I
any
have
idea?
really, I have absolutely encountered that, because sport aside, for about 6 years, I ran a interdisciplinary treatment center working with people with chronic pain and chronic disability. So we had people coming to us who had been out of work for 3 years, 4 years, 2 years. We had a very expensive program as a residential program. And our job was to get them back to work. And in Canada, we're very generous in workers' compensation and paying people who are out of work. So many of the people that we were seeing were people who had jobs that they maybe didn't really want to get back to, and they were being paid 80% of their salary. And so they would come in and we would we would video them doing a whole bunch of different things. And we had an interdisciplinary team of doctors, physicians, I should say, psychologists, um, vocational therapists, occupational therapy. We had a whole team mobilized to get these people moved back to work. And we would videotape them when they came in, and then we would videotape them after 4 weeks. Say it was an 8-week program, and then we'd videotape. Well, after 4 weeks, we would show them the gains they were making. And we say, if you keep working with this, I think in a few months you'll be able to get back to work, or in a few weeks. And they go, yeah, but my back is still bothering me. And yeah, but my shoulder's still sore. And yeah, and I, after doing this for a year or so, I began to realize every group we had a Mr. or Miss Yeah, but. And this may be not something you want to record, Wally, but I was talking to one group and I called somebody Mr. Yeah, but, and a couple of guys in the group started laughing. And I said, what's so funny? And they said, They were from the former Yugoslavia. I don't know if they were Serbs or Croats, but they said, in my country, yabat is a word that describes what men and women do at night in the dark. And apparently the word yabati means exactly that. So I said, the person you screw when you say yeah, but is yourself. When you do the yeah, but thing, you absolutely negate what went before it. So it's yeah, but you've just negated what went before it. So you highlight to people are often unaware that they're just negating everything when they say that. Yeah, you can, if you do this and this and this, then this can happen. You work on your your edges and your this and your that, and you're going to find that you have more jump and more. Yeah, but they've just negated what was said before it. So you have to explain to them what they're doing. Do you want to learn? Do you want to improve? Or do you want to just disagree? Yeah, but stops the conversation.
One of the things that coaches have done, and there's a bit of an art to it, the same player makes repeated mistake and isn't owning up to them. He's yeah-butting them. And finally, he has to look at them. And it's like you videoed those unemployees. And I'm wondering, Peter, have you ever done that? Have you reached a point in all your coaching where you've had to show an athlete that, in fact, he wasn't doing what he thought he was doing?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've done that, actually exactly that, with a player who there was some plays we looked at, we did team video, and our breakout wasn't necessarily what it was supposed to look like. And it was, well, the puck was in my feet. Puck was in my feet. That's not my fault. Puck's in my feet. So we looked at the video. I looked at the video with him, again, not trying to single him out in front of the entire group, because then the individual just gets super defensive, and it becomes, to me anyway, it becomes counterproductive. So me and the assistant coach, we looked at the video, and they said, so let's look. I said, yeah, see, look, there's the puck. It's right in my feet. I say, where are you? Well, I'm on the boards. Okay. You're on the boards and you're stationary. Is our winger stationary on the boards, or is he supposed to be moving and presenting and becoming available? Well, I thought that's where I should be. Okay, that wasn't my question. What is our breakout? Well, our breakout is with us moving in that. I said, so is it a reason why he put the puck in your feet, or is it an excuse why he put the puck in your feet? And through that conversation, showing the video, I mean, if you want to use the expression, I guess, they owned up that, yeah, you know what, you're right. I should have been moving. He had pressure on him. I should have been in a better spot to help my teammates so I could get a pass. So yeah, I've actually done that.
Yeah, video is a really good teaching tool. It could really show people the right stuff. That's why I say that's who we are. You see how he did that? That's who we are. Or it can show them, no, that's not who we are. That's not who you are. And it's a great teaching thing. I remember I worked with Nashville, and I was talking with Mitch Korn, who was the goalie coach, and Mitch was talking about the tremendous value of video teaching his goalies, working with his goalies. And it was funny because we were in the dressing room, and he said, I really like to show them the goals that were scored on them and how they can learn from that, which makes some sense. And then he left the room, and Anders Lindback was the backup goalie, and he was sitting there, and he said, I like to watch the saves. And and it works both ways. Video, you can show people doing the right thing, how good it looks, so they do more of that, and you can show them doing the wrong thing so they make the correction. And how you teach that is, of course, there's a bit of a skill in that.
Sure. And I would always tease the guys too. I say, unless somebody mugged you on the bench and stole your jersey, I'm pretty sure that's you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One of the things that I've advocated for years since working with the women's national team, I've always been intrigued with video learning, and not just to point out mistakes, but um, coaches generally overuse video. They're up front on the stage and they're going to do 30 minutes or 40 minutes of video and do all the talking, and athletes turn them off. Just they tune them out very, very quickly.
Yeah.
So I tried with the national team, and I suggest to all coaches, this is a technique I haven't experimented with, but I think they should, is send out a clip of a goal you've scored showing what happened 20 seconds before, maybe 30 seconds before, and have every team member write down what they saw done well by all the players in that situation and collate the feedback and share it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the second thing is, okay, we did well. The other team, what did they not do well? So you could easily show video of you guys not doing it well, us, our team, but it's not going to be productive at all. It's going to be demoralizing. And so I felt use video of positivity of your clips, but have them look at the other clips. And in the course of looking at the opponent's clips, admitting that we make mistakes. Human beings make mistakes. Both teams make mistakes. It's the ones that learn from them that are going to get on, move on, and be successful.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought, I just wanted to take an opportunity to jump on that, Saul, because video learning is, I think, it's underused. And with today's technology and instant use of video at the bench, I'm more curious with the players and their iPad and what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Because coaches are no longer pointing at them and telling them and yelling at them. The players know what's going on and they understand what they could do and should do. So the coach has more to learn from them than the.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting to watch games and to see the coaching staff showing them stuff on an iPad right there, right in the middle of the game. But that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe it's time to move on. And I have to get back to a few other things in life. But
well, so I want to thank you very much for coming on. I'm so glad I got a chance to do this. And what I've done is I've taken notes and I'm going to sort it out and edit it in about 6 different segments. And I want to promote the books you've written.
Oh.
And the work you do. And if you could, allow me to share the contact information with the audience, that I share this with over 600 coaches. At the end of the weekend, I'm finished editing it. And it's a pay it forward philosophy. If would they please share it with other coaches and their network of influence? Because obviously there's something to be learned from whatever you choose to listen to or watch. And it's all for the good of the game. So,
Wally, there's 3 books of the 10 that I've written. There's 3 I think are particularly relevant to hockey coaches and hockey players. One of them is Hockey Tough, which a lot of people know about, A Winning Mental Game. I think it's a really good book on the mental game of hockey. Another's a book I wrote some years ago called Why Teams Win. And I talk about 9 keys that help to make teams successful. And leadership is one of them it's one that affects every other key. Leadership affects the strategy, the feedback, the team's identity. It's critically important in team success. And the third book is one that it's called Winning Golf, the Mental Game. And I just wrote that a couple of years ago. And because hockey players and hockey coaches are often ardent golfers, I mentioned that book. I guess because the season is in the winter and you have the summer off, but there sure is a lot of golfers who are hockey players who are golfers. Winning Golf, the Mental Game. So,
Sal, the book Winning Golf with your clients, hockey players, have you had any feedback on how the golf game and that work and that book contributes to their hockey game?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Wally, because the flip side, in the book, I have one chapter where I talked to 3 hockey players, 3 NHL guys who I worked with, not just once or twice, but for a couple of years, and 2 NFL guys that I worked with. And I asked them how the work we did that helped their hockey has helped their golf game. And the same with how the work we did to help their football help their golf game. And the 3 hockey players, one was Morris Lukowicz, who's a real friend of the Wally's Sharks group. And Morris had some very interesting things to say about how the work we did with hockey affected his golf. Another was Cliff Ronning, who I worked with for years. And one of the things Cliff said it's much easier to play hockey than it is to play golf, because when you get pissed off in hockey, you can cross-check somebody. You just can't do that in golf. And unless you're, what's that guy, Adam Sandler played in that movie, Happy Gilmore. And the third guy was Brett Hedican, who had some very interesting things about how the work we did affected his golf game, improved his golf game. So there is a transference from one sport to another, for sure. If you learn how to manage your focus, how to manage your emotions, and how to manage your attitude, it's going to play in everything you do. And the one thing I didn't mention, I mentioned a bit of focus, a bit about feeling, right? Creating right feeling. I didn't say anything about attitude. And there's just one thing I'd like to share quickly. And that is, I often ask players, how committed are you to being the best you can be? And, they always say, well, I'm really committed, or I'm very committed. I say, if you're really committed, then whatever comes up, you've got to use it. If you don't use it, it can use you. And I'll give you an example. If you're playing well, you use it to build your confidence. You have a good shift, you're moving your feet, you're winning battles, making good passes. You come off, that's me. Use it to build your confidence. If it's not going well, use it to improve your process, improve your training. Or you can think, I'm not so good, and then it starts to use you. Or you can blame, well, it's the guys on my line aren't good players. It's not me. That changes nothing. So winners find a way to use everything. They're always using it, either to build their sense of self or simply to improve their process. And then that thought, I will bid you adieu. It's nice seeing you again, Peter. It's nice absolutely visiting with you, Wally, always. And Peter, please give my best to Mike.
I will, for sure, 100%.
Yeah. Tell me, you should talk to me. We can work with the Colgate team.
I will. I'll tell him.
Okay. All right.